about your journey as a writer thus far?
So I started screenwriting at UCT. I got my honors in screenwriting, where I learned like the art of storytelling and everything like that, you know, how to build a character arc and put together a plot. And then I got sucked into the corporate world, and I still got involved in writing and did writing to earn a living, but I definitely digressed from what my passion was, which was telling stories. And then in 2019, I had it with the corporate world, and my fiance actually said to me, "Cans, you know what? You need to pursue something that you want to do." So I quit my job and I went freelance, and it was very scary. We hopped on a plane to Brazil, and I had enough money to pay my debit orders. I wasn't completely reckless. I had enough money to pay my debit orders, and the rest, I just slowly accumulated clients to do that. But it was still writing for other people. And Ollie, my fiance at the time, he's still my fiance, but he said to me, "I challenge you. You're always writing for other people. I now challenge you to write a book for yourself, minimum 100 pages by the end of the year." And we were in Brazil, which is why the story's set in Brazil, because that's where I got the inspiration from. And then for Christmas, he got a little first manuscript wrapped under the tree. So awesome. Challenge accepted.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. That's such a cool story.
Yeah, now I'm kind of continuing to go into my own. I've developed an online platform, Chosen Narrative. At the moment, it's only on social media, Facebook and Instagram, but I'm hoping to develop it into a website. I was inspired by the Marshall Project, which is a criminal justice journalism organization in the United States that focuses on like real life stories that humanizes the criminal justice system and just drives awareness to that. So I'm hoping to kind of, through stories, build up my own personal writing.
Cool. Awesome. That sounds fantastic. What a cool story. So where did the idea, okay, so you've given us a tip already that you were inspired while you were in Brazil. Where did the idea for the Voice of the Youth come
from? So we were in Brazil when I wanted to, I've had this challenge, now I have to write this book. I'm very competitive, so when I get given a challenge, I have to do it. And I was just, Brazil is actually so similar to South Africa, which is home, in the sense that there's a stark contrast between the wealthy and the poor. And it was so prevalent to me, especially where we were staying. We'd walk to the beach to go surfing in the mornings, and there was a favela, which is the equivalent of a township or an informal settlement community, like literally 200 meters from where we were staying, which was the touristy area. So it was just a very stark contrast. And having come from a country where that is also so obvious, I just would spend hours on the beach handwriting the first draft, getting the inspiration from around me, but also from back home. So it was a really beautiful blend of these two cultures and these two societies that I feel very strongly about, because I've always felt compassion for people that are judged by society because of their own actions, without society realizing the drive behind their actions. For some reason, I've just always had a heart for that. So I decided to just put that into a story and kind of express that in a way that could be relatable for others.
Cool. Wow, that's awesome. It's really interesting, because I think that, for a lot of South Africans who may not have traveled, we often have this idea of how our own country compares to other countries. And I think it's really interesting to hear your description of how similar it is in many ways. And I think many countries are like that. Why this genre? Is crime something that interests you in general?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I think since the pandemic, everybody's got this newly found obsession with true crime and, serial killer documentaries and everything. But criminal justice is actually my passion. I'm super passionate about it. And some people are born with a passion for old people. Like my sister loves old people, and I get so bored with them, no offense. But, she has such a heart for it, and she cares for old people, and she's so patient. Some people love children, other people love animals, and that's where their heart is, or that's where their passion is. And mine is definitely for criminal justice and social justice, and, the systemic oppressions that bleed into criminal behavior. And I can't explain it, to be honest with you. I don't know why, but I'm not going to try explain it. I'm just going with it, and I'm just using the momentum and hopefully, just trusting that it's part of the process. And it's quite lovely to feel passionate about something where you can work on it. You can tell, you know, because I'm a writer, I can write about something that I'm passionate about, and it doesn't feel like work, you know. So that's why I went with the genre, because I do feel like criminal justice needs to be humanized. People are absorbed by this, they've got this morbid fascination with crime without realizing that, you know, these are people, these are real stories. And I want to tell the stories behind the statistics. You know, you read how many people incarcerated are of certain races, or, you know, the drug crime rate is increasing, but you don't understand why, and you don't understand what's causing people to do these things. So yeah, that's telling stories about that in a relatable, telling stories about crime in a relatable way, I feel it humanizes it. You know, it induces empathy, it inspires change, it educates society. So that's why, I don't know why I'm passionate about it, but I'm just going with it, you know.
Yeah, no, look, it's, I think when you are that passionate about it, a specific topic, it is often difficult to put it into words, because it's something that's born inside you. It's not born in your brain. You know, it's just, I often think, you know, even though these passions can be cultivated by our childhoods and things like that, I often really feel that the true passions for people and the true things that they're supposed to be doing in life, you're almost born with it. You know, I'm sure scientists would disagree with me, but
maybe. But so I think, like, I struggled with it for a while, because I am a white female in South Africa. I come from a privileged upbringing, and I always felt like I couldn't, you know, I haven't had a very close encounter with incarceration. Like, I haven't come from a broken home where you know, my daddy's been locked up for years, or and this is the sad reality for a lot of people. And I almost felt like, because of my privileged position, my voice wasn't valid, or I'm not allowed to speak about it. And I think I'm sure some people may disagree with me and say that I still don't have a voice, or I'm allowed to have an opinion on it, but I think that if I can use my privilege for something that is good, and for telling stories, and for you know, maybe connecting with a different circle of people, and sharing stories with those groups of people, then, you know, I'm just, yeah, you've got to trust the process, like I said, and I'm over feeling bad about it now. You know, as long as you're sensitive and you're not obnoxious about anything, and you acknowledge the reality of the situation, I think that stories are meant to be shared, you know.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. It's you know, there will be people in the world who will invalidate your voice because of your own background, but would we rather have many people who have so-called or, you know, normal or privileged backgrounds sitting down and saying nothing? Or would we rather have them standing up and telling the stories in the best way they know how, and thereby giving those who live these stories the permission to tell their own stories? You know, because it's
exactly,
really
you're
providing
giving
a platform.
voices.
Yeah,
exactly. No, you're 100% right. I'm not claiming to have experienced that. It's more just opening up the doors for communication, I think. Yeah, you nailed it. Exactly.
Yeah, and I guess that ties back to the title of your book, you know, is giving a voice to the youth. So yeah, that fits quite nicely. So I really found that your descriptions of the characters and the settings were really rich. What process do you use when you're writing to be able to produce those sort of vivid word pictures?
So obviously, being trained as a writer at university helps to, you know, hone certain skills. But I do think that the story was inspired by real people and real places. And so they exist, you know, in many ways. Not exactly, obviously, I've added a bit of imaginative flair to the characters and stuff, but they are real people. And so I have tapped into like all 5 senses to try and flesh that out, you know. So just coming back to, what would that feel like? What would that taste like? What would that, you know, look like? And I kind of use that as a driving force for descriptions and for the setting and for characters.
That really pulled through really nicely, because I found it,
Thank you.
yeah, very easy to picture. And I mean, that's such an important part of reading a book. You've got to be able to be immersed in the story, you know. So I think you did a really good job with that.
Thank you. It was actually a concern of mine, because, well, not a concern, but I reread, obviously as a writer, you read your draft like a million times.
Yeah.
And I did a masterclass before, because screenwriting is a little bit different to writing a novel, you know. So I did a little masterclass online just to see if I'm getting the hang of it. And I read the book of the author, one of their books, to, you know, get a feeling for where they were coming from. And I was so bored. I'm purposefully not mentioning the author's name, but I was so bored because it was like 10 pages of describing the garden, and that's not me. Like, I'm a little bit like more, you know, it's that screenwriting coming in. It's like to the point, quick descriptions. So I was a little bit concerned that maybe, you know, my words were too sparse, but hearing that you think that the descriptions are rich, that I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I think that was spot on. You gave just enough detail, because I know exactly what you mean about books, and I would also not be able to read a book that has, you know, as you say, 10 pages describing the garden. You know,
it's a struggle.
Some people in the literary world might feel that is, you know, the way books should still be written, or it's, you know, the classics. But I just feel that literature has moved on from those things. There's so much more happening. You know, we want a lot more out of the books we read these days than knowing exactly what the poinsettia looks like. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Or how the single flower is wilting in the corner, and they never mention the flower again.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Yeah, it's you know, I think we've got to the point in writing as well as reading where every word really needs to matter and do something. You know, it needs to have impact. So I think you did that really, really well.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, then I think we may have already sort of touched on some of the themes in the book, but the book really is packed with lots of important themes. So which were some of the most important for you, and what did you want the reader to sort of walk away with?
I think for me, the most important theme that I hoped to draw out was the systemic oppression, and how society is structured in a way, not because of our like individual doing, but it is just the way it is, that certainly gives people an upper hand in many ways, and other people not an upper hand. And privilege plays a huge part in it. And I'm not only talking about financial privilege or racial privilege, I'm talking about mental privilege. Like, if you were born with mental fortitude, that's a huge privilege. And being able to say no to certain things, no to drugs, no to peer pressure, that is a privileged position. Again, not because of your doing, it's just the way you were born. And I do think that we are, as humans, we're so quick to judge other humans based on our own experiences, and that's not constructive, you know. And you need, so I think systemic, and in particular systemic oppression, really I felt was a strong theme that I wanted to draw in, showing people that people come from different lives, they come from different walks of life, they have different struggles, they have different battles. This is something we all know, but hopefully my book is just a different way of showing it. Another thing that I really feel strongly about is the drug culture. I think it's a lot more harmful than what people give credit to it. And I know it's recreational drug use is often shrugged off as experimental or as you know, fun. And I know there's a lot of science coming up about like how, you know, certain drugs can actually help with certain psychological struggles and issues. I'm talking more specifically about the recreational use of drugs. I think that there's a lot more to it than what people give it credit for. And there's a lot happening behind the scenes than that little baggie that you do at a party or whatever the case may be. And I think that's another theme that I really wanted to bring to the forefront, how, you know, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The end product is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a whole narrative that happens behind it, and it affects more lives than just one. So I think systemic oppression and the drug culture are two things that I really wanted to just that I think they inspired the story. So I hope that those themes do come through in some way.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
As you're mentioning it, it certainly is. Those certainly are themes that I would have picked up as well. And I think you very clearly you know, sort of brought them through to the writer. So I think you did a great job of that as well.
Did you pick up on any themes that you think you got outside of that?
Yeah, so I think that probably I think it's the next, yeah. So I think one of the next question that I wanted to ask you is probably the theme that stood out for me the most. And I think that's something that I've picked up a lot in my own research for the podcast, is how that fine line that so many people straddle between falling into criminality and really wanting to stay straight, and how difficult that is, and all of the different things that play into that, you know. And so I think that was definitely it for me, that came through, probably because that's something that I think about a lot, is how easy it actually is to fall into criminality.
Well, that's that mental fortitude that I was talking about, that privilege that you have, that maybe privilege is the wrong word to use, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah,
like
100%.
If you're born with a strong mind, like it's you're a step up. Like it's same as people struggling with depression or something, and you say, oh, we'll just, you know, get over it. You can't just get over it. It's not that easy for some people. So
yeah, so that I mentioned, you know, that straddling that fine line. So, you know, if this story was inspired, you were inspired by what you saw happening around you in Brazil, do you think that this is maybe a real world representation of something that young men like Z are regularly facing on a daily basis in, sort of, call them third world countries if you want to, or not, first world too?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. And I can say that quite like with confidence. I know I'm a female writing this story in the perspective of a man, but I've seen it firsthand, and not just in Brazil. I've seen it in my own life, people that are around me that struggle with peer pressure. They struggle with validation, especially from broken homes. You know, that craving or that need is so much more desperate. So I definitely think it's a real world representation. Again, not for everybody, but definitely for a certain group of people. And I think women struggle with it too. It's not only young men that have to, you know, straddle this line. I think that young women also come across these challenges on a regular basis, maybe in different forms, maybe in the same form, but it's definitely a real life challenge. And I think that normalizing it helps us empathize with it, but it doesn't take away from the severity of it, you know. And I think the reason I chose to go with Z as a young man is because statistically, young men do tend to fall into criminal behavior more than women. And obviously, in the hope that the story would be relatable to a wider audience, I did make it a man, and the characters were inspired mostly by men. But I do think it's important to note that women are also prone to these kind of challenges and these struggles as well. I think peer pressure doesn't know any boundaries, you know, that need for validation and stuff. But yeah, I do think it's definitely a real world representation.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, so the end of the book was definitely satisfying enough for any reader, including me. But it does end in a bit of a cliffhanger where you always, you know, you sort of hope that you might see a follow-up for Z or some of the other characters from the book. Do you think we might see one of those?
I thought about it. I really did. And when you emailed me back after reading it and you mentioned that, I was like, oh, maybe I should do a follow-up. And then I was like, no, this is exactly what I want. I want people to think about it. I don't want there to be a follow-up, because the future is not the same for everybody, you know, obviously. And I actually want people to, I want the end of the book to inspire some sort of action. So whether that's continuously thinking about it, whether it's outrage at the injustice, whether it's increased empathy for people that find themselves in that position, whatever it is, I want people to sit with it and I want them to stew it, you know. So maybe one day there'll be another story from Baba Blade's perspective or from Shake's perspective. But as it stands, I think Voice of the Youth is a very good reflection of society in its open-ended ending as well. So yeah, maybe, but probably not.
Okay. No, I mean, that's fair enough. And, you know, I think we all want these sort of packages wrapped up in pretty little bows, but that's not, as you say, that's not the way life works. So, you know, if art is going to represent life, then let it.
Exactly. No, exactly. Just to end off, I would like to just come back to Chosen Narrative, which I'm hoping to really pick up. I've only just recently started it. It is just at the moment a platform for Instagram and Facebook, and its goal is to tell the stories behind the statistics. So a lot of my sources, unfortunately, are American, because people talk more. You know, in South African news, we hear the headlines. There's not many people offering, well, not that I know of. So if you have any suggestions, please send them my way. But there's no nonprofit organizations that focus on, you know, criminal justice or telling the stories behind the acts. I know the Marshall Project, which I referenced earlier, is such a brilliant source, because there's a whole series where the prisoners, or the incarcerated individuals, sorry, they get to write their experiences, and they write, and their stories are shared. And they're super powerful, you know. So that's my end goal, to tell the stories behind the statistics, and I'm hoping to develop it. I'm actually working on a really awesome project as soon as the book is launched officially. It's actually, I've got it here. It's a photography book that a friend of mine did.
Wow.
He's so talented. It's full of sticky notes, as you can see, but it's got loads of photographs. He spent time in Drakenstein prison, and correctional facility, and there's a boxing program that teaches, in an effort to rehabilitate the incarcerated people. It's, you know, it's an attempt at rehabilitation. So I'm working with him to dive into some of those stories behind these powerful images that he's got.
That is amazing.
So yeah, I just thought there's no point to me telling you this other than just I'm hoping that Chosen Narrative grows. I'm hoping that the stories can be told a little bit wider, to humanize, you know, the world that a lot of people live, that we all keep at arm's length. Let's be honest, nobody really wants to dive into that. It's scary. Like you said, if you're not mentally resilient, it can be tough. But I think there is a way to share it with people, you know, that gets people to think, at least, if anything. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And that Voice of the Youth is going to be on, I'm using that platform obviously to promote Voice of the Youth.
Awesome.
So yeah, those two are connected. That's
awesome.
The hopeful growth.
That's fantastic. It's really, really nice to see the connection between, I mean, having read the book and now understanding where that book sort of developed from in your own, you know, experiences and what you're passionate about. I think it really gives a really nice, like, holistic sort of picture to it. So I think that's really cool. Awesome.
Shane, thanks.
Cool.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm really appreciate it so much.